Welcome to Yelling Into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin, joined as always by Scott. And now that the limited time auction house mount is out of the cash shop, how long do you think until we see Blizzard's second milking of the FOMO of their players, Scott?
Well, I don't know if you've seen it, but in China, they're going to have a special golden version of the Ashes of Alar mount, and that is available for a low price of $27 in a random loot box, and you might have to spend $1,500 for it. So,
oh dear Lord,
it's already here.
I have not seen that. I'm assuming that's for like a Chinese New Year thing, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's only available in China because I think if they release loot boxes in WoW elsewhere, I think
gambling and
people
yada, yada.
would absolutely lose their minds. Yeah.
Well, jokes aside, I do actually wonder when we're going to get, they've opened the floodgates at this point, right? So, surely we're going to get another auction house mount in the cash shop at some point, sometime down the line.
Yeah, I guess you could say assume. It was a Operation Floodgate.
I see what you did there. But, cash shop stuff aside, all of that happened on the 6th of January. So Mythic Plus testing has also started as of last Tuesday, as well as the anniversary event has ended, and the mount was removed from the store at the same time. And the nice thing is everybody was thinking that you were going to have to convert your bronze when the anniversary event ended, and if you didn't, you would just lose out on that currency. Blizzard actually tossed us a bone here. If you didn't log in, they automatically converted your bronze to Time Warp badges, which is nice.
Well, let's be clear here. They will.
True.
With the release of 11.1, your badges will be converted. They are not now. If you missed, you just have to sit on that useless currency for another 2 months. Not a huge deal, but yeah.
Well, we're only going to get 2 more time walkings between then and now, right?
Well, something no, because it's the turbulent timeways right now.
I forgot about that. I completely forgot about that. Okay, well, that sucks because now you're going to miss out on stuff from vendors, and then you're going to have to wait for the vendors to come back. But either way, it doesn't matter. If you play the game, you're going to get to see every single time walking. You'll be playing when it comes out. It's not a problem. The nice part about it is you're not going to get stuck with useless currency forever. They're actually helping you out there. So if you forgot to go transfer it, you will have to wait a little bit, but it will get transferred. Mm-hmm. So that's cool.
Yeah. I did buy every single tier set. Even the Yucky Hunter one, I bought it because I had extra currency. So what happened? I was not doing a very good job collecting the currency because I really wasn't doing the anniversary event stuff on a weekly basis at all. But when 11.07 came out, everything you would do on the Siren Isle would also give you a fair amount of that currency as well. And so I suddenly was getting a bunch, and I just finished out getting everything I needed, which was nice.
I got all of the tier sets I wanted, and then some that I'm probably never going to use.
Yeah.
And then out of protest, didn't buy the Hunter one.
I'm going to roll a Hunter just to wear that tier set around you.
That's going to make me really sad because I'm legitimately thinking about playing Hunter next season.
Should have got the tier set, man. You could be a weird, funny dragon, man.
I'll pass. I have a Hunter transmog that I really like. I'll just stick with that. But all of this aside, all of that to be said, funny enough, I don't know, I get why they called them anniversary servers for Classic, but it's kind of weird that the anniversary event is over, but the anniversary servers are still sticking around. It's just a weird naming thing.
Yeah, for a long time. I think they just kicked off the second phase, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The non-hardcore ones are going through the Burning Crusade. So it's gonna be a while that those servers are still around. Yeah. Eventually we'll just forget that they're anniversary servers. I really do think what's long-term the plan for Classic is that they're just going to do a time-locked progression thing where maybe annually, maybe semi-annually, I don't know, they'll roll a new, because they can build these mega servers now, that's the one thing they did with SOD is they put this new technology where they don't have to divide people amongst servers. So I really think they're just going to roll a new mega server every so often, and it'll just slowly progress up to the end of the Burning Crusade, and then they'll do it all over again, and they're just going to keep doing that forever.
Yeah, I can definitely see that because like I'm playing on Doomhowl right now for hardcore, which is like the only hardcore anniversary server, and at peak hours, it gets up to 9 layers.
That's 9
crazy. Layers of the entire world. Like there's an insane amount of layers. But anyways, phase 2 started. Dire Maul's out. A couple of other things, but the main thing is Dire Maul's out. You can get better pre-raid BIS stuff.
Or you can abandon your group and get them all killed, right?
We won't get into that. But anyways,
can I just briefly say,
yes,
this is the dumbest shit. I hate like hardcore. I get it. I think the OnlyFangs thing is like a really cool from a content creation perspective, but like just the sheer number of like like backseat quarterbacking I've seen on this whole stupid thing. I just don't. Who cares? I don't care. It's stupid. Yeah. This is why I hate hardcore. It's stupid.
But yeah, no, I mean, all of this happened last Thursday. All of the release and everything like that. And so if you watch the hardcore clips at all, surely you will see exactly what Scott and I are talking about. So we don't need to go into any more depth there. But that to be said, I guarantee you're going to see a lot more people dying in Dire Maul very soon. So keep an eye out for that.
Hey, how come hardcore is not advancing into another expansion?
I think that hardcore is just classic.
Yeah.
Because that was the initial like add-ons focus.
Yeah.
Was just classic.
I agree, but I was surprised. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I was surprised when they announced these anniversary servers and said that they were going to progress through to the Burning Crusade. They specifically said, except for the hardcore one, that's going to stay classic. I guess maybe because I don't know. Like the thing about hardcore is that it's essentially evergreen because people are just going to continually be dying and going again. And so you're never going to get a situation where zones are empty. But perhaps the thought is that if you open up the game too much beyond the original one, it'll lose some of that. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. The thing that pisses me off, though, I'm going to be real with you, is you say people die and go again and it keeps zones populated. I swear to God, I level my rogue to 60 and then I went to go create another character. And there was like 4 times as many motherfuckers in the Barrens trying to steal shit from me as there was when I was doing it on my rogue. So, yeah. It's crazy. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know why it's not going to be C. I think it'd be cool to see a hardcore Burning Crusade. I think it'd be cool to see people try and do like Kel'Thuzad on hardcore, or if you make it to kill Jaden on hardcore would be really cool. Or I guess not Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah, I was like, can't we already do Kel'Thuzad on hardcore?
Kel'Thas. By the way, Nax hardcore, fucking insane. Your tanks just get one shot on Kel'Thuzad like regularly. It's fucking wild.
This is like I entirely honest with you, like the hardcore thing is not for me. Obviously, I've said that many times, but like I can understand the appeal of like the try to get to level 60 without dying part of hardcore. Like the idea of trying to do fucking raids just like is insane to me. Like
terrifying.
Like, I mean, some of the earlier raids, like it's not that hard, but yeah, like stuff like Nax, I'm like, fuck off. Like, no way. Like, it's so easy to just like to do everything right and still die. Like, I just can't imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. But all of the like anniversary stuff, we'll try to like give brief updates on, but I doubt we're gonna cover really super in depth. I'm playing hardcore currently, but it's not, I don't know. We've done the classic song and dance like 4 times at this point. So like, I don't really think that there's anything new to discuss here. So I'm not going to make it like a super major focal point.
It's classic. It's by definition, nothing new. Unless you're playing on SOD, which is the one thing that we do not do. So I mean, I'm glad people are really, really enjoying it.
But something that is new, Scott, Plunderstorm. And that starts tomorrow for us, yesterday for you guys. And it seems like this is, I was hopeful we would get a little bit more information around this. But it seems like for the most part, it's just going to be the same song and dance as it was the last time Plunderstorm came out, with recolored rewards and probably new abilities. I don't think we really know a ton yet.
I think it's kind of wild, and maybe they're just have this attitude with Plunderstorm that they're always just going to keep it a secret until it launches, because that's what the original Plunderstorm. But yeah, I kind of expected an overview of what's changing, and all we
Mhm.
really know is that they're something we knew when they first announced it, is that they're getting rid of the renowned track advancement with Plunderstorm. It's just a store. You collect plunder from playing games and you spend your plunder on stuff in the store. Essentially, what they've done is, if you're someone that hates Plunderstorm but just wants the mount, you don't have to get all the way up to the top track to get the mount. You just need to save enough plunder to get the mount. So, how much we know how much things cost in the store, that's been data mined. We don't know how much you get for matches. Like, is it a 1-to-1 conversion of the amount of plunder you collected during the course of the match? We don't know that. But I guess I like it better that way. I didn't mind the renowned track version either, because I was enjoying the game. So it was just fun to see that renowned track go up as you played. But I can imagine that it might be better to just be able to target the things you want. Because yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this list of things, and there's things on here I was like, yeah, I don't need any of that. Um,
Mhm.
I probably just like the mounts, and that's about it for me. So some of the titles probably too, mounts and titles.
Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say about this is, since it is all speculation, I do think it, like, myself being somebody who played Plunderstorm past Max Renown last time, so I thoroughly enjoy this, and so this is going to come from a place of that mindset. But I do think it'd be pretty funny if, to get the mount, you had to play more games of Plunderstorm this time than you did last time
That would be
to get
funny.
enough currency.
So one cool thing that they've done is they've put everything on the store, even the stuff from the first round of Plunderstorm.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you missed it, uh, you can get everything essentially. I think the only thing they're not 100% sure you can get is the Plunder Lord title, which I'm fine with that. Make that a you had to be there title. That's totally
Mhm.
fine. Everything else, I think it's great that they let people have it. Although I just imagine people like absolutely just miserable grinding of this game mode they hated, just to learn that it costs 7,500 plunder now and you could get that in a few games. That's really hilarious to me.
Yeah, the other part about Plunderstorm that I didn't really think about is, when I was playing this when it first came out, like, I had at least one person that I was playing this game mode with 24/7, and I don't know that I'm going to have one person to play with 24/7 this time around. So I don't know that I'm going to play as much, cuz, like, I did solo games. I did quite a few solo games actually, but they're definitely not as interesting. They're not as fun.
Yeah, I think duos is just like the way the game was meant to be played.
Mhm.
And I think it's infinitely more fun than playing by yourself. Yeah. I don't know how much I'm gonna do it either. I mean, like, looking at the stuff, there's certainly stuff in here that, like, yeah, it'd be cool to get this, cool to get this. But yeah, like you said, this is recolors of existing mounts. This is recolors of existing equipment. Like the big the outfit you got, the Plunderstorm outfit that you got, um, the the new thing is just a recolor of that,
Yeah.
and there's some just weapons and guns, and it's. I mean, it's cool. Like, I think what they said specifically is, don't think of this as Plunderstorm 2.0. Think of this as Plunderstorm 1.5, and I think it seems certainly that is the case. I'm mildly curious about what the weapon changes are, if anything. Um, and
Yeah.
then we'll see. Like, I think they're going to do another like content creator tournament, which is fun. I think Dorky said that. I don't think he was supposed to reveal that he accidentally leaked that. Um, so I think that's cool. The build hype around the game mode. I think ultimately, like, what I would like to see possibly is that this is just kind of an evergreen game mode that, like, they don't make a limited time thing and is just around constantly. Or maybe that's not a good idea, because then, like, the population just kind of plummets over time, but that you bring it back regularly. I don't know
Yeah.
how often that cadence works. When do you remember when it first launched? Was it like a year ago?
It was right before War Within came out, wasn't it? A couple months before War Within came out.
Was it? No, that was Remix.
Oh, true. It was right. It ended as Remix started,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I feel Remix went on for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So, let's see if I can find. I can't find when it started.
Mists of Pandaria Remix started on May 16th, 2024.
So I bet Plunderstorm started in like February of last year. So it's been about a year. I would like to see it be annual, maybe even semi-annual. They do this every 6 months for like a limited amount of time as just like a thing. I think that'd be cool. And they continue to iterate on it both from a weapons perspective and a maps perspective and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be interested. Honestly, I would be interested to see it stick around if they did like a seasonal thing, but like short seasons.
Yeah.
They need to be like constant refreshes. I hate to compare it to Fortnite, but it needs to be something like Fortnite where it's getting like constantly updated and constantly changed.
Yeah.
Um, something like that.
Did you see
But
that the one the weapon that like you charged up and shoots you forward and you spin? I forget what
mhm,
it's called. That's just
slicing
a
wins.
monk ability now. That's a Windwalker
Really?
monk ability. Yeah, it's the first empowered ability that they've added to a class outside of Evoker. It's on the PTR for monks right now.
I kind of hate that in game. I hate any ability that forces you to move.
Yeah, but like
So
you can control how far you move with the empoweredness. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's interesting because I think when they first announced these empowered abilities, like one of the things people said is like, "Oh, is this just going to be a thing that we do? Like all classes are going to have you have to hold down the button ability," and that didn't happen. It was just evokers, and now it seems like they're starting it.
yeah, yeah. Well, so I guess the thing that I do want to say about Plunderstorm that I'm a little bit disappointed in actually is we got the first set of like equipment for Plunderstorm, the first armor set and everything like that, and then they brought it into the monthly like tender shop as a recolor,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're getting just another recolor for the second Plunderstorm. So like, it feels a little bit, I don't know the right word. I'm going to say disingenuous, but it just feels weird that something was exclusive and then it was made not exclusive. And now we're not even getting like exclusivity brought back into the Plunderstorm rewards this time around. So, like, I really, 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 really want at least the title to be an exclusive reward. I really don't want that to come back.
Yeah, I mean that's World of Warcraft. You know, this is what they do. Nothing is truly exclusive anymore.
Yeah,
I don't care. I don't use the outfit, so I don't need to
that's
look like
true.
a pirate.
Well, the red one and then the following orange one both kind of look rough. So the black and purple one actually looks kind of cool.
Well, now you got to get it. Let's see how much you're gonna need. You're gonna need 2,500, 3,500, 4,000. You're gonna need
Quite a bit.
6,000 plunder.
That's
See, but
okay.
I don't know if that's a lot or not. It depends on how much you get per game.
Well, we'll figure it out. But I think, Scott, that's probably enough on Plunderstorm because it's all speculation as of right now. We'll get more information once it actually drops tomorrow for
Mm-hmm.
us. And we'll see if we're actually playing it and we'll have something to talk about next
Yeah,
week. But I do kind of want to look towards Mythic Plus testing.
sure.
Um, So the first thing that I want to say about Mythic Plus testing is I personally did not watch a ton of this. I knew it was only going to be one dungeon, and so I didn't get super involved in watching any streams or anything like that. But I did watch. Um, I read something where somebody was going through the dungeon journal and actually reading like the base values for abilities, and it looked like things were very highly tuned for just Mythic 0, which means when you get scaling involved with Mythic Plus, those things balloon out of control very, very quickly. Now, this is to be expected. Like, they will always make things a very high number to start with and reel it back because it's always easier to make things easier than it is to make things harder. So this is to be expected. I don't want anybody to get up in arms about this, but I do think it's interesting because Ian, in an interview where pretty much nothing was said, did make it very clear that they were looking specifically at some of these higher value items or higher value tank buster abilities. And those are likely going to be reined in, as well as saying they've made changes, and the way that their pipeline for pushing changes to us works is things could already be addressed, and we just haven't seen them yet.
Yeah.
So,
So essentially what happened is, and we talked about this in last week's episode. This is actually perfect. Over the break, right before Christmas, they released this PTR build that was data mined by Wowhead, and the data mining showed a bunch of changes to all of these dungeons, including the Theater of Pain ones you were just talking about. And everyone was kind of freaking out. They were freaking out because they're like, hey, this looks like you're kind of doubling down on all the bad stuff from season 1 that we didn't like. What are you doing? You're making tank busters more frequent and hit harder. You're making AoE attacks hit harder. What's going on here? And I just want people to remember that Tevin and I cautioned you, don't overreact to these things because it's a very early PTR. And essentially what happened is, Ian had to go to PC Gamer for an interview. They probably called PC Gamer and said, hey, you want to do an interview? Just because they needed to get some information out there about this, because they were watching people like freaking melt down in the forums. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, as far as content goes, they were very light in that interview. And I think because the main objective of the interview was for Ian to say, calm down. Essentially, what the bullet point summary of what he said is that, yeah, the way the development pipeline works is that it takes many weeks of iteration before something is release ready, or at least even PTR ready. And so the build that hit right before Christmas is an old build. It is an old build that does not include all the changes that they've made to the dungeons based off of feedback from season 1, so that by the time these dungeons start opening up and testing starts to happen further, updated builds will be there that will reflect the changes that they have made to the system based on the feedback and the numbers and everything they're seeing from season 1. So we just haven't seen that yet. So this is one of those things that, like, there's going to be a new build tomorrow. Tomorrow for us, yesterday for the people listening. And so they'll probably know all this already, but I would not be surprised if we don't see in the build that hits tomorrow. I believe next week's testing schedule is Operation Floodgate again, plus all the War Within dungeons. Or maybe it's just, actually, I think it's just the 4 War Within dungeons.
yeah.
And so I would guess we would see a build that includes a lot of changes for those 4 dungeons specifically, and the changes that would you would think reflect an updated design philosophy. Now, what those are, I can't speculate at all. But I hope it would be an ease up on some of the healer checks and ease up on some of the tank busters and things like that. But we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that I do want to call out that is very crucial to me here in this interview, 2 things that Ian said. Number 1, Blizzard's aware of issues. Obviously, they are aware of issues. They have data that we don't get access to, and they're trying to solve the problem of us in these dungeons that we've had previously, solve problems in where people just ignored parts of the dungeon and make people engage with the dungeon as a whole while not making it feel like a chore. I can't think of Motherlode is the dungeon I'm thinking of specifically, where this was like a huge problem. Like the third part of the dungeon, you fought like 2 mobs and then you went to the final boss. Like it's something that is inherently a problem. Like getting all of your count in the first 5 minutes of a dungeon and then just doing weird skips to get to bosses without fighting trash.
Yeah.
I don't think is the way that Blizzard ever intends us to do dungeons. And so they're not going to want us to keep doing them that way. So this is to be expected.
Yep.
The second thing being dungeon difficulty being equal is of like primary concern for them, and they're actually looking into that. This is something that I felt like has been missed so many seasons, at like over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's nice to hear them say that this is something that they're actively trying to make sure is top priority for them.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always going to be like a harder key and an easier key, right? Like you're never going to be able to get absolute parity in all dungeons. And I actually kind of think that's a good thing. I think it should be, the system is actually healthier when you have a couple ones that are the easy keys and a couple ones that are the hard keys. but I think it should be closer than it is. Like,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. This has been a problem essentially since they started doing the seasonal rotation with these things.
Hmm.
It's something they've missed the mark on just about every time. I will say that I think the collectively agreed upon best Mythic Plus season in the past few years, which is season 3 of Dragonflight, I think got the closest. There were definitely ones that were harder than others, and definitely ones that were easier than others, but it still felt like across the board parity was fairly even. Um,
Yeah.
I think this season in particular is pretty bad. Nothing is as bad as like how easy Shadow Moon Burial Ground was versus all the other dungeons in that season. Nothing quite like that, but I think keys like the Dawnbreaker and keys like Mist of Tierna Scythe comparatively to keys like Stone Vault and Grimbatol is just like it's really night and day. Like we're talking multiple key levels of difficulty in between those
Hmm.
dungeons. And yeah, that's not good, and they should constantly be monitoring that and iterating upon it. And yeah, like the problem with Mythic Plus as a seasonal thing that's scored for points is you really have to get that right from the jump, because making dungeons harder after the season has started is never going to go over well. Making them easier, I think the system supports that much better. But yeah, you can't really make them super much harder after the season has already started. So they really need to nail this time. And I think this is why the testing schedule is they've never done the testing schedule for Mythic Plus like they're doing on the PTR this time around. They've never
Hmm.
done this kind of specific focused, we're going to spend this week on these dungeons and make sure we get it right. So I'm hoping that is part of the philosophy shift, and we need the good data. We want good testing. I think part of the problem, though, Tevin, is there's just not too many people that engage with the PTR in that
Yeah.
way.
So this is like two pronged for me. So the first one is one that you and I, well, I think both we agree pretty heavily on both of these, but we didn't actually talk about it or put it in the script for that matter. But the first one is in the past, their Mythic Plus testing has been absolutely fucking
Yeah,
atrocious.
it
Like
sucks. Yeah.
it's literally it doesn't force you to have affixes, so people don't have affixes, and you only get to test for 2 days and then it goes away. And then you don't know when it's going to, you don't know if it's going to come back the next weekend or if it's going to come back at 2 weekends after that. You don't know what dungeons are going to be available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's their Mythic Plus testing in general has been atrocious. And this PTR seems like it is at least an attempt at making it better.
Mm-hmm.
But the other problem that seems to be, I think, a really big driving factor for a lot of people not engaging in the PTR is add-ons. Like getting
Yeah.
your add-ons working on the PTR is just it's a fucking nightmare.
100%. This is it for me. 100%. Like I would have loved to jump into the game last week and test out the new dungeon. I would have loved to do that. I thought about doing it, and then I thought for 30 seconds about how much of a pain in the ass it would be to get my UI in a place where I was comfortable with it. Obviously, I don't need my UI to like perfectly match what it is in retail. I didn't need that. I'm not saying like if I don't have weak auras, I can't play this game. That's not what I'm saying. But even just the work that you have to put into even the base UI to make it something that's functional for you, it's just not worth the effort. It's just really not worth the effort and time. And I think a lot of people think that way. Um, and so like it does push a lot of people away from participating in testing that maybe otherwise would have. I have the same problem in beta for that matter, by the way. I don't do a lot of
Yep.
testing in beta. I'm not a very good beta tester for Blizzard, just because I would like it's just I do think the game requires, if you're doing Mythic Plus, like I think the game requires a certain baseline of add-ons and interface enhancements in order to make the stuff in not only doable but enjoyable as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean I like we've talked about add-ons in World of Warcraft before, and I'm not saying we need to get rid of add-ons. I'm certainly not saying that, but it is just like an unfortunate side effect of this whole thing is that like yeah, just rolling in a new instance of the game and getting started is not an easy proposition for anyone.
Yeah, and the other part of this too, something that I thought about when you were just talking about beta is the majority of the population who interfaces with PTR and beta and alpha are not people who go into it with the genuine interest of giving feedback. They go into it with the interest of getting early access,
Yeah.
essentially, which is that is the correct thought process for a consumer paying for something that you are then being given early, which we are.
Yeah.
But the problem is Blizzard doesn't have beta testers, and like we're going to continue to run into this problem as long as Blizzard doesn't do internal beta testing, because if you pay somebody to test your game and you pay them to tell you what's wrong with it, they're going to tell you what's wrong with it. But if you have people paying you to test your game and paying you to tell you what's wrong with it, you're not going to get as good of information.
Yeah, and one thing I always kind of felt, and I don't know how much truth there is to this at all, but I kind of felt when they were doing beta as just like you opt in and sign up and hope that your name gets picked. Like I always felt that like one of the things they were doing was tracking your participation in the feedback process, that like if they give you a beta key and then they look at your interface with the beta and you submitted 0 bug reports, 0 pieces of feedback, didn't do anything, then maybe they put you in a bucket that's like, maybe we don't give them a key last night next time. And then the tester themselves are kind of aware on that of some level, and they're like, well, maybe I better be more active in my feedback submission, else I be excluded from the list in a future expansion. But yeah, with beta being a pre-order bonus, not a, sorry, a ultimate edition bonus, whatever, you're just buying into that system and you have no incentive to actually test or bug or provide feedback or anything. Yeah, like your use for them is just from a numbers perspective. They'll just crunch data based on how you interface with the game. They won't actually get any direct interaction, which is a lower quality level of testing for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a problem. I think I mean, I saw a fair amount of people do this dungeon this week. I think a part of that again was the fact that it was a new dungeon. I'm curious what the numbers look like when we get to the legacy dungeons week of beta testing, when it's just the 3 old dungeons. What's the participation level going to look like there?
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the content creators that are not doing hardcore are pretty starved for content right now, so they'll probably jump on and do a little bit of testing. But yeah, what the numbers are looking like? Are they getting the feedback they need? I don't know. I hope so.
So what I do want to say, and this is going to lead us into like the last thing for Mythic Plus that I want to talk about, but also lead us into the next section of the show I want to talk about, is Operation Floodgate as a whole. Like this dungeon, and again, this is just primarily secondhand from things that you and I were just talking about, so you might be able to elaborate a little bit more than I am. But it sounds like it's open, which means you have a choice of where you're going, and it's sounding like maybe they're listening. Like there's less interrupts, but there's more damage per pack, so healers can still have that feeling of like needing to do things on trash and not being like extremely overwhelmed yet. I don't know. Either way, it seems like we're at least getting the inkling that they are listening, and the fact that this is a completely new dungeon built from the ground up gives me even more hope that maybe this is part of their design decision going forward, that we're going to get rid of like the 900,000 things that you have to do in a pack of 3 fucking mobs. It's just, I don't know. I'm optimistic, I guess, for this.
Yeah. One of the things I saw, the feedback was like overwhelmingly positive on this new dungeon, which is always great to see. And a lot of the compliments were around the boss mechanics, which seem fresh and new and fun, which is very good. The thing we didn't talk about is, I think we had talked about in a previous episode, that they announced that they were redesigning what the swirly looked like in World of Warcraft, and we got to see it for the first time in these dungeons this last week, and it looks very good. I am happy about it. It has a clear border on it, so you can clearly see where the edge of the swirly is now. Now, of course, the key to this is that when they program the effect going off, that they correctly program it to go within that border of that swirly. And if they miss that, it's going to feel especially annoying because it's very clear where the swirly ends now. But it looks good. I like it. And yeah, I think light on kicks is a lot of the feedback I saw, but like heavy on other stuff. Like a lot of the trash in this dungeons has like void zones and things like that go out really, really quickly. Like there's one mob that just does I think it's similar to Avalanche in Neltharion's Lair, where it's a cast that casts it very quickly and will immediately like shoot a saw, like a spinning buzz saw, up from the ground in your location. The people I watched do it were doing like a 10, so that wasn't one shotting them in the 10. They were like they took like half health and were able to move out of it. But you got to think as that key goes up, there's gonna become a limit where those buzz saws are just one shotting immediately, and so you're gonna have to be moving as soon as the cast goes off. Lots of unforgiving stuff like that. There's also mini bosses in it that have pretty brutal heal checks on them. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess overall, I think it's better to have stuff that you have to learn how to move out of rather than did we press our kicks in sequence correctly. I think that's better, more fun design. We'll see how it actually plays out. And I agree with you. Like, I don't want to conclude so much from one dungeon. But to your point, it's the newly designed dungeon. It's the newest piece of content that they've designed from the ground up in the dungeon environment. So you think it would reflect their current design philosophies the most. So I'm for that. I think kick and interrupt gameplay is not the strongest, and keeping that to a minimum is good. And yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And so, like, a couple of things to be clear, I'm fine if there's interrupts. I just don't want there to be 15 things that you have to interrupt in one pack.
Yeah.
Like, that's my biggest issue. And then the second thing is like, I hated the pre moving in Neltharion's Lair for Avalanche, but that was also like, it only picked 3 players to go on. And so, like, if you know it's coming and it's going to be on your entire party, that feels a lot better than, oh, I got unlucky and it picked me in the like 0.2 seconds I couldn't move or needed to finish my cast or something like that.
Yeah.
Because like it becomes unexcusable then, right? Like you need to be moving no matter what because you know you're going to get hit, you know you're going to get targeted, which you should go with that assumption on Avalanche anyways, but it feels better. Like it feels less, I don't know, singled out or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm fine with this. I think that it's fine to have a learning curve on things like that. I will say it's a little annoying when you have like a pack of 6 mobs and 3 of them are doing this thing that you have to pre-move, and it's hard to see like cast bars for it, and you end up having to create weak ores to tell you when to move and shit like that.
Yeah.
Like that's a little frustrating, but it can be worked around and people can learn and people can adjust. So I think it's okay, I guess, is my first take on it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I definitely saw the buzzsaw mechanic and said, oh, it's a weak aura mechanic. It's definitely going to be, it's just going to play a sound and I'm going to move. And that's how I'm going to handle it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the thing that I wanted to lead us into, though, with Operation Floodgate and season 2 as a whole, I said this last week and I'm going to just reiterate. I'm stoked for this season. Like the aesthetic of this is actually insane to me. And I'm so looking forward to a goblin season with a goblin raid, a goblin dungeon, all of the wacky shit that's going to come with that, all of the lighthearted fun that we can poke at all of this stuff. Like, I mean, we talked about it last week. Like, even the raid bosses have fun, interesting, hilarious names and gimmicks and things around them. So, like, I think that at least the aesthetic of this season, for me, is going to be pretty kick-ass. I don't know how you're feeling.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about it. Aesthetically, for sure. My big worry is whether they've, I don't want to say burned bridges because that feels too harsh, but my big worry is, are they going to be able to pull people back in that have become frustrated? Because like look, I think the anger and annoyance at the state of the game right now is a little bit overblown. I think people are like, yes, Mythic Plus is not at its high point right now. Certainly true. Not going to argue that at all. The system has problems. They're addressing some of them. They have not addressed all of them, but it's not like that bad. and I just feel like people are at a point, like sometimes I think people with this game get to a point where they're just like, there's nothing they can do to make me happy anymore, and I'm just going to be pissed off for the sake of being pissed off. And that's what I feel like we're at with a lot of people. So like, will they be able to attract enough people back to the game? I think that remains to be seen, but
Mhm.
at a personal level, I am extremely excited. I don't know if you watched any of the raid testing for the boss that they did on Friday last week. Boss named Styx Bunk Junker. Um, it was a heroic version of that boss, and it looks pretty damn sweet. It looks really
Mhm.
cool. It's very hectic, but in a fun way. Um, you have to like roll a ball of garbage over other ball of garbage, like you're playing Katamari Damacy, and then roll that into the boss for extra damage. It just looks pretty neat. So I think I'm pretty excited about the raid.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty awesome raid. And the dungeon looks sick. Honestly, like I, everybody's pissed off about not being able to fly and everything like that, but I think that the drive system has a potential to be very cool and unique, and maybe not something that we like bring back ever, but like for this very specific season, I think it works. You know,
Yeah.
like I think that this is cool. I think that this is interesting in a way that we could like mess around with something new, but not something that necessarily has to stay forever.
Yeah, it's buggy right now. That's what I've understood from the PTRs. It's a little buggy, but that's what testing is for. And hopefully they get all those bugs straightened out before it goes live. But it seems like everyone enjoys it. It's fast. It's maybe too fast is some of the comments I've seen, that it's literally at top speed faster than dragon riding. Which when you're having to like drive around a city with sharp turns, it leads to hectic. One thing that I didn't realize it did, but when you're in your car, your aggro radius shrinks down to be basically you have to be on top of the mob to aggro it, which means you will just like, yes, you're not flying, but you will just get to like drive around without worry about being chased by mobs constantly. Yeah, I mean, it seems cool. It seems fun. I agree with you. Like, it doesn't have to be like the new way you travel. Sometimes we can just do something because it fits the aesthetic and the idea of this just one place, and then we can move on from it. Not every system in this game needs to be evergreen. Um, and I think this is one of those ones that will work for this zone, and maybe some other aesthetically similar zones in the future. But it's okay if it's just that.
Yeah, so okay, Scott. I guess some expectations that I have for season two. I know we were just talking about some, but like things that I would like to see Blizzard continue to do or do in general. Um, Obviously, my number one is always going to be more Mythic Plus changes and improvements. They've done some of these throughout season one. They've made Mythic Plus better. They've made crest acquisition better. They've made crafting gear better. Um, all of that might have been too little too late to kind of salvage season one. But nonetheless, it happened. They are addressing it, and I want to see that continue. And I want to see other Mythic Plus improvements happen. I want to know that they are listening outside of like the major content patches. You know,
Yeah.
like eh, just dungeon tuning alone means that they're listening to issues that are coming up in dungeons. Have data to show that there are actual issues in dungeons. So I don't know, the continuous development just for validation reasons, I think, is very key for Mythic Plus going into season two to keep players interested.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're doing a fairly good job of showing some of that stuff, but they could certainly do better.
Mm.
I think there's. I wonder, like, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but I do wonder if sometimes they just need to like lay out their philosophy a little bit, because like one of the things that we saw in a comment from a listener last week was like depleting keys is the number one problem on a lot of people's minds right now. The fact that keys deplete is a fundamental flaw and needs to be fixed. And again, like we talked about last week, the idea that we introduced this new thing that for a second people thought it was looked like it was going to address the depletion problem, and then at all wasn't. To a lot of people, was them. We're just ignoring. Blizzard is ignoring the problem. They are ignoring the problem, and like I would love them to just come out and say, "Hey, we don't think depletion is a problem. Actually, we understand why you feel that way. We get it. But we don't think that's a problem. We think that is a system. I mean, you and I have talked about the reason that system exists in the game, but like we think that's a system that serves its purpose in the game and doesn't need to be changed. And so we're not going to do that. And so so it just like, yes, I still think there are people that will look at that and say, you're not listening. And it's like, but at least then they would be like, no, we listened. It's just, we disagree. And like, that's okay. And you could think that's the wrong decision. And a lot of people will, but like, at least they could do something like that. I don't think they ever will.
Yeah.
But I think they should.
Yeah, I definitely think that any sort of like PR or anything around like Mythic Plus throughout the season would go like leaps and bounds so long to just make sure that people still feel like they are at least like being heard, investigating things that people have brought up, and whether they address them in a way that people want or say, no, this is actually fine for us. Uh, Honestly, I don't really care either way, but we know that we're getting that validation that they are actually listening. They're looking into things rather
Mhm.
than, you know, 6 months later they decide they actually want to make a change. And I get that the 6 months later they decide to make a change is a little bit disingenuous because it isn't like, oh, we're gonna make them deal with it for 6 months. No, it's just they push things out in major content patches, and that's the deadline that they set for themselves. So the devs had to meet this deadline, and it allows them to prioritize things. Like, I work in software, I know how this stuff works. It's just, it does feel bad when it is a game that you pay for on a monthly basis to feel like you're being ignored.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, do you have any? I have a couple of expectations that I want from season 2, but I don't. Do you have anything specific that you're looking to get out of season 2?
I just want to have fun, man. I just want to have fun. I want to play the game and have fun.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to some of the magic of some of the previous Mythic Plus seasons, and the feeling of them. Like, and a lot of people talk about the dungeons, and like, ultimately, I don't actually think like the dungeon pool itself was hugely important to season 3 and the success of it. I mean, I think those are all good dungeons, but it was more like the design philosophy around the dungeons and not necessarily like the mechanics within the dungeons themselves. And so like, I'm not like doom and gloom about this set of dungeons necessarily.
Mhm.
Um, I just hope they like, I do think they need to address the tank situation. What I really want is maybe this will come as soon as tomorrow. I want a post that says how they're going to address the tank problem, and I really don't think the problem is just tank busters and there's too many tank busters. I think that is a large part of the problem. Sure, I don't think that's. I think people are not enjoying playing tank, and that is a problem that will affect the ecosystem and health of the game. And I would love to see them address that. So, I mean, same with healer. Like, I enjoy healer. I think healing is a lot more stressful than it is now than it was when I came back to the game in Shadowlands. For sure. Every boss has a pretty brutal heal check. Trash packs do as well. It's not easy, and I like it that way, but a lot of people don't.
Mhm.
And so I would like to see them at least address that in some way, and we'll see.
Yeah, the thing that I would say about tanks, and the thing that's like gotten me away from tanking so much lately, is that there is no worse feeling than going into a pack literally a millisecond in and then you die.
Yeah.
Like, knowing that you have to pre-pop a defensive for every single pack in a dungeon is just annoying. It's not hard. It's not something you can't do. It's just annoying.
Yeah.
And so like, I would like to see that addressed, as well as just tank survivability. White hits are doing the majority of your damage still. And I don't know that that should be the way that it is. That feels very weird, but yeah.
I felt like there was a time where like the point of active mitigation was that you couldn't have it up at all times. You know, like there was this thing where like you have your active mitigation, and part of the skill expression of the class is that you are efficient and smart with your active mitigation. But then you have these cooldowns to fill in the gaps between active mitigation. And I really feel like what you're talking about is the tank running into a pack and dying is 99% of the time because they haven't had a chance to get their active mitigation ability up yet. And
Mhm.
so like, not only now is it you are expected to have that Like Shield of the Righteous is expected to be up 100% of the time. If you do not have it up 100% of the time, you will die. So you have to. So it's having shield block or shield the righteous or iron for etc. up 100% of the time is the expectation, and then cooldowns are really for the tank busters or the big damaging moments. They're not for filling gaps anymore. They're just something you will need on top of the other thing or you're dead. And that does create situations where like, yeah, like I think it used to be that there were some tanks that felt very weak on pull. It feels like that's all tanks now. It feels like all tanks, the first 5 seconds of the pull are the scariest. And if you fuck up just a little bit, there's very little grace room for any mistakes there, and you're dead, and then the group's dead, and then the key's dead, and people don't like that. Like, I totally understand, because it happened to me multiple times, and you just feel like a piece of shit. You really do. And it's like, I don't know, like I don't know how I could have played that better. Like I feel like I did everything right, and maybe I like was half a second slow on one thing, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, and I will say the other thing too that I think needs to be more communicated. Details does a good job of telling you how you died, why you died, but the in-game recap is kind of dog shit.
Yeah.
It's useful in the sense that you can see the last like 5 abilities that hit you, but the damage values associated with them are not always correct, and it doesn't actually always show you why you died. Details will say like died, no cooldowns were used or things like that. Like you can specifically see shit like that. And so it's really hard to discern if you're a tank who is learning what you need to even be fucking doing better, So I don't know how you really solve that. It's going to be trial and error, but it's hard to have a learning experience when you don't even know what to learn from that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time, and I've definitely been seeing it playing my monk with pug tanks. Is just like the game does a very bad job of teaching you what you'll need. Like I think here's one of the worst instances of this, in my opinion, is Dawnbreaker, which is, as we talked about, a pretty easy dungeon overall. The timer is very forgiving. Mechanics aren't that hard. Trash is actually not that bad, all things considered. The one thing about that dungeon, though, is the first boss, the tank buster ability on the first boss is like one of the hardest hitting tank busters in the game, and you just do not realize how bad it's going to hurt until you get hit by it the first time. And it's like I've had so many groups where like the tank just gets one shot, and then they wipe and people leave and they're like, we're done. And it's like, I guess technically you could be like, well, tank, you should have learned. Now you saw it once in your next key, but like that's pretty rough, and that makes someone feel like a piece of shit. There's no way of knowing. It's like that. This is part of the way key scaling kind of works against you, because like when I did that dungeon at first, and I know we've talked about this before, but when I did that dungeon at first, I didn't even realize that was a hard tank hit.
Yeah.
On top of what it does damage to the group as a whole, but I didn't realize that was an exponentially harder tank hit until you get to the key level where that kills you, and you're like, oh fuck, I didn't know I needed something for that. And then you learn that you need something for it, and then it's like you go up, it's like, oh, I didn't know I needed something stronger for that. I like, and it's just it's very rough. It's like it's really not that hard of a boss, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and there's no way of knowing.
Yeah,
I don't know how they fix that particular thing. But I just feel like it just feels like being a tank is just one of the most unrewarding roles in the game. Like, if you play great,
that's expected.
Yeah. And you
if
might
you play
not
great, you live, and that's expected. But if you mess up and you like fuck up anything, routing or anything like that, then your group's pissed off at you, and you wipe, and the key's dead.
Yep.
So,
and tanks get blamed more than healers. I know everyone talks about how the healer gets blamed for everything, but nah, tanks get blamed more than healers, at least publicly. Like, yeah, I'm sure there's certainly failed keys I was in where people fucked up and blamed me, but they didn't like say it to me. They probably were just grumbling under their breath or talking amongst themselves or whatever. But man, people are very, very vocal when a tank fucks up. They certainly are.
Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is like on how to solve this. the only thing that I can think of on how to solve this is not even what I think would be the best solution, but like it would be to implement something like the tank buster icon or something from Final Fantasy. Like there is an effect on you that you know you are about to take a fuck ton of damage in Final
Mhm.
Fantasy. There is a
Yeah.
literal like red shit on you, red arrow above you. You know you're about to get slapped, and then you know to press something.
Yeah.
And it would have to be something like that for you to like preemptively know to do something the first time you ever saw a boss, right?
Yeah. And I think something like that would be fine in the game. I know they worry about like the aesthetics of stuff, but I think, you know, I do think the swirly that they just came up with, that's going to be the game from now on, like clearly heavily borrows from Final Fantasy. And I think like, do they look natural? I guess maybe not a little bit, like it that everything's like a perfect circle that has like, I guess they don't look natural, but it like works. And it's like sometimes perfect is the enemy of good, right? And so it's like
Mhm.
you need something that's visible and easy to see, and it's okay if it aesthetically messes things up. So, but I do think there's a way they could add like a tank buster mechanic. It doesn't have to be the one like Final Fantasy where it's like a big like caution tape. Like
Yeah.
the Final Fantasy ones are kind of ridiculous. I mean, they're very easy to see and you can immediately understand them, but they're kind of crazy sometimes. But it could be something that's consistent across the board and signifies to people this is a hard hitting tank hit. You're going to need to do something about this. Because yeah, I mean, it's definitely true that the game doesn't tell you that at all. The only way you can figure it out is by going through it the first time.
Mhm.
And yeah, like we said, like the heroic versions, the mythic versions, and even the low key versions, they just don't have enough damage baked into them for you to learn that. And then you get into the higher keys, and suddenly people are yelling at you for a thing you couldn't have possibly known about.
Yep. Yeah. Well, so I guess the next thing that I want to say, Scott, is the other major thing that I want to see in season 2, because we didn't see a ton of it in season 1, and that's again to be expected because it is the first season, but I want to see some class reworks, class redesigns, class reimagination, uh, all of that stuff. Like we got the new druid class tree, which is awesome. And like I said, I've been looking into potentially playing hunter or maybe even rogue next season, which would be absolutely wild if I did that because I've never played rogue at endgame ever. Um, but hunter is getting, uh, we're going to call it a rework. They are getting reworked. Marksman hunter specifically is getting like a bunch of things about it changed,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately, the way that marksman worked before is you have all of these things that you have to manage, but by just doing your rotation the correct way, you're just managing them anyways. So it's not like things that you have to like legitimately think a ton about. And it's going to be more or less the same once they do these changes. It's just going to be a little different. There's going to be a couple of other things you need to manage, and your priority is going to change a little bit by just doing the rotation in a way that is logical. You'll solve 90% of the rotation. That being said, marksman hunter specifically, aesthetically, again, I feel like I've only talked about aesthetics this entire show, but
But
it's
those are important. Those are very
it's
important.
it's so cool. Like they aren't going to have access to a pet at all now. But
Yeah.
they're getting a lust and they're getting this like falcon bird eye in the sky thing that
Yeah,
is
it's
like,
like a non-controllable pet thingy.
yeah, it's like filling in that void of the pet, and you get this thing that gets put on an enemy and then you consume it, and you consuming it is this bird flying down from the sky and hitting the enemy and then flying away, and your lust is tied to this like bird shriek shrill thing. I don't know, it's just super cool. I'm looking forward to it. The other thing that is pretty major is they're giving them a 2 target cleave ability, which is a little weird to me because trick shots, their normal cleave is if you hit 3 targets with multi shot, then you get trick shots, which deals 75% of your total damage to like 5 enemies for a couple of your abilities. But this 2 target cleave thing is only 40%. So it's just like significantly fucking worse. But you have the ability for 2 target cleave, and a lot of classes don't have easy 2 target cleave.
Yeah, and that makes a
So
big difference depending on raid bosses. They like a lot of those 2-target raid bosses, so that's a big deal.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty exciting. Didn't they also like completely overhaul the pack leader hero talent tree, which was like the
Hmm.
shittiest one that like it's called pack leader, but had no, like you hear pack leader and you're like, oh, you're gonna summon like a fuck ton of pets, and Blizzard was like, nope, you weren't actually, but now finally you are. I don't know why it
Yeah.
took them so long to get there, but that I mean that's pretty exciting too. So yeah, I'm happy that they're continuing this thing that I think they started in Dragonflight that every patch cycle we are going to take a look at a class and say, do we need to redesign this thing from the ground up? And they're doing it.
Hmm. I want to see more of this though. Like, and
Oh
I
yeah.
want to see more of this in a way in which it doesn't break things. Like when they redid Paladin, Paladin easily became the best DPS or one of the best melee DPS. It became the best healer. It became the best tank. We need to be careful to not do that because
Yeah.
then you get into the situation that happened to Holy Paladin where it went from like the best of the best of the best of the best to being almost fucking unplayable at endgame content, like high mythic plus keys and shit like that. Like it was just lacking. It didn't have the heals. Its cooldowns were so fucking long and lackluster that it just didn't matter. And you just can't do that on a paladin. Like paladin healers lifeblood is their cooldowns doing something because they have 19 of them and they don't do shit outside of that. So, yeah, I just want to be cautioned against. I don't know. I would like to see a lot of these aesthetic reworks and aesthetic adjustments, maybe even before some of the actual like gameplay adjustments. I don't know. I'm just very scared that anytime they touch something and rework it, it becomes the best ever, and then it gets nerfed so heavily that it
Yeah.
becomes a husk of what it once was.
So do you think that's part of the design though? I mean, obviously they don't want to spend all this development time on something and then make it middle of the pack to the point where no one plays it. Like so part of me thinks that it's almost by design that anytime they rework a class, they're going to make it a little bit better than all of the other ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Then they tend to overreact. Like poor Holy. I mean, I played a Holy Paladin in season 2 of Dragonflight. I thought it was great. It was so much fun. I was enjoying the hell out of it. And and it wasn't just because it was overpowered, right? Like it obviously was. I am fully on board with that. Like the first couple weeks playing that healer, like I was like my consecration was doing more damage by itself than like any other healer was doing, which was just crazy. So totally agreed that it needed to be brought in line a little bit, but they tend to just overdo it. They overreact, and yeah, and they gutted that poor spec, and it still hasn't fully recovered. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I would like a world in which obviously they want these new reworks to be good and push the spec like they reworked Shaman a little bit, and enhancement has been incredible. But then not overreact and just nuke them. I mean, but I do think it's part of their general game design that they want like they want a continual rotation of what the meta is, and maybe not the true meta, but like just like what the popular, slightly overpowered class is. I think it's in their minds healthy for the game that that is kind of a constantly rotating um, mark to look
Mhm.
for. That it's going to be a different class or set of classes every few every few seasons.
Yeah, and I do, to your point, I do think it's part of the design decision to make it a little bit better. I just worry that in doing it too heavily, too heavy-handed, we get into the situation that we got with Holy Paladin.
Yeah.
But again, that's also probably not even true because Holy Paladin was like a perfect fucking storm of things. Like they were the only healer that had the ability to handle the dispels needed for that season.
Yeah.
They were the only healer that could completely make themselves immune to damage, drop so many different things that other healers couldn't even deal with. Like they just
Mhm.
had to heal through. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of just a perfect storm for Holy in that season too. So maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, and maybe it isn't actually all that big of a deal, but it is something that I just want to make sure that we are a little bit mindful of.
Yeah, I mean the nightmare scenario I think is augmentation evoker, right? Like that has been the biggest problem I think they have with Og is that it has been in that spot for too many times. Like they certainly wanted Og to be in that spot the first season the class was released, the spec was released. But they don't want it to be there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. The other thing about reworks that I think is cool is it allows them to simplify and diversify things from each other. I mean, Paladin DPS got very simplified by the rework that they did, but then you look at things like Shaman. Enhancement Shaman is simpler than it was, but it's not simpler just for the sake of being simpler. It's simpler to remove redundancies and
Yeah.
remove like fringe edge case things that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean,
Just streamlined.
one of the, I guess, the side effects of iterative design is you tend to get more complicated as you go on because you're building things on top of things on top of things. And so the idea of having a rework allows you to take a step back and be like, hold on, wait a minute. Let's just rip all this away and start fresh and then build what we want the class to look like right now. I think they've tried to do that with Disc Priest multiple times. Like I think in season 2 or 3 of Dragonflight was when they really tried to simplify the class a little bit, and it was some of the most fun I've had playing the class. They're trying to do it again here, and it really interesting. They took away a button because they said Disc Priest has too many cooldowns to manage. You've got too many cooldowns to manage. They took away Rapture, but then they moved the Ultimate Penitence, which is where you float up into the air and shoot penance bolts everywhere. They moved that way further up the tree to where it's going to become a lot easier to take for most Disc Priests. Same with Evangelism, which used to be a choice node that no Disc Priest ever took in Mythic Plus. They just didn't need it. Both of those are abilities that now you probably will take in Mythic Plus. And so suddenly it's like, you had too many cooldowns, so we removed one. But also, here's 2 more. So it's like, sometimes they don't quite achieve their goals there, but I mean, maybe they removed Rapture with the idea that we're probably going to have you take these other 2 ones, and so we need to at least reduce it by 1. Maybe, I don't know. It's also really interesting. This is a side argument, but I was listening to Automatic Jack talk about this today, and he's like, the tier set for Disc Priest wants you to shield as many people as possible with Power Word Shield, but then they took away the cooldown that lets you use a bunch of Power Word Shields on people. And so you're just going to be shielding less this season than you were last season. But the tier set wants you to do that. That doesn't make any sense. So, they're not perfect. That's for sure.
Yeah, they should look at Blood Death Knight if they want to remove some buttons from something.
Oh my God,
Lord,
please.
that spec.
Yeah, holy shit.
But,
just like, do your opener. Okay, hold on. Let me take 10.
Give me
globals.
15 seconds. I'll be there. Yeah, Blood Death Knight, bit insane. I think Priest, not so much Holy, but Disc is in that situation. Honestly, Enhanced Shaman is still in that situation. It's a lot better now than it ever was before, and things make a lot more sense than they ever did. They still have quite a few buttons. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go through the great pruning that happened with like Legion and, well, I guess starting with Kata and going towards Legion and that realm of things. But I do think that as we add more things to classes, we need to start looking at what can we remove from classes, because it does just become a little bit too much. I mean, if you have like 40 keybinds and you still don't have enough keybinds, that's too many fucking buttons.
That is, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think sometimes they remove, like, in this pruning, as you talked about, they remove like the flavor abilities and things like that. And I always kind of get bummed out about that kind of stuff. I think there's like a difference between, so there's rotational abilities and cooldowns, and then the flavor buttons. Like, I don't care if a class is like 100 just for fun flavor buttons that they don't press in as part of their normal rotation. Like, that's fine with me. It's just like what you have to press and manage in your rotation should be constantly looked at to make sure that you're not getting too convoluted and too bloated.
Yeah, and I think the same thing. I want aesthetics to be paramount, because I think that getting people wrapped up in the class fantasy is ultimately going to make them want to play their character more for the mass populace. Now, there's still going to be the min-maxers who only play classes because of efficiency or because of meta. That's perfectly fine. But I think for the majority of the player base, actually feeling like you're playing the class that you're playing or the spec that you're playing is very important for people continuing to come back, getting attached to their character, wanting to do things on it. And so I do want them to continue this like look into aesthetics. What they're doing with Marksmanship Hunter, I think is like A plus, slam dunk. Let's keep trying to do things like this.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about with season 2, Scott. It's all currently speculation, right? But
we'll see more. There's more raid testing this week. There's more Mythic Plus testing this week. I do assume that there's going to be a big build that comes in tomorrow that's going to be pretty illuminating as far as balanced design philosophy. But yeah, we're kind of in a holding pattern right now.
Yeah.
When do you think we're going to get a release date? When do you think that's going to drop?
I mean,
we basically know what it is.
I was about to say, I feel like we have it. It's just they're not going to tell us that's what it is until they feel confident that they can make that date.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's the biggest thing.
Are we saying let's get it? I think we've said this before. Are we saying March 4th or March 11th? Where are we at right now?
I would be more inclined to say probably the 11th. But that's just me being more pessimistic and wanting to give them more time to iron things out.
Yeah.
So that's my vote.
We'll see.
The other thing that I did want to say is as Classic continues to roll on, these anniversary servers, to my knowledge, are at an accelerated rate at releasing things. So if you are playing on them and it does feel like things are going kind of quick, it's because they are. So do make sure you keep up with Wowhead to know kind of when everything is dropping, because it isn't going to be the same cadence that it was in 2019. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, more power to you guys. I can't imagine playing again.
I was actually looking at Season of Discovery the other day, and it was like, man, something about this makes me just want to like try it, but I really don't want to like level to 60. Like I don't want there to be a boost in Season of Discovery, but also like I kind of just want to go in and like see what classes feel like and then just not play. Like I don't have the intention of actually playing or raiding. I just kind of want to see how things are feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I plan to fully just watch once they start releasing the new raids and things like that. That's just going to be a watch on Twitch angle for me. I have no interest in actually going and playing it, but I'm curious what a newly designed raid in the classic mindset looks like. So we'll see.
All right, Scott. I don't think I have anything else for this week. It is a little bit of a shorter episode, but I think that's kind of par for the course, seeing as we're going to get probably a decent amount of PTR callouts and changes tomorrow. Fingers crossed.
So. Yeah, I hope so.
But all right, guys. Well, as you could tell earlier, I'm extremely excited for Plunderstorm. I do have tempered expectations because, like Scott was saying, it is more of like a Plunderstorm 1.5. But I want to know, how are you guys feeling about Plunderstorm? Are you excited? Also, how are you feeling about Season 2? Are you excited? Is your class getting reworked? So any of these things, if you want to talk about Season 2 or you want to talk about Plunderstorm, as always, contact us over at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. Yelling Into the Void Wow is YouTube as well. And then Twitter is at Into the Void Wow.
And if you are not already subscribed to this podcast, well, you should do so, because as Tevin just called the shot, March 11th, there'll be a whole bunch of new content, and we're going to talk about it. So you got to make sure you don't miss the episodes as we ramp up for Season 2. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And then also, please consider liking and subscribing, commenting on YouTube. All of this helps us get more exposure and introduced to more people, helps us continue to make the content that we're making here, and really just gives us something to interact with you guys. So please, as always, comment on YouTube. We love chatting with you guys. We love hearing what you guys have to say. So Until next time, though, guys, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.